In Genesis 12, 1-3, we're introduced to a very special person selected by God to fulfill the promise God made when he cast Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. That promise was that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the seed of the serpent. Abram lived down in Ur of the Chaldees in the land of Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, near the Persian Gulf. By God's instructions, Abraham left the land of the Chaldeans and went to Haran, a journey of about 1,000 miles. This journey is recorded in Genesis 12 and starts with Abram being in Haran. Acts 7, verses 1-4, tells us about Abram's journey to Haran. God tells Abram to leave his own country and people, and if he does, God will cause Abram to become the father of a great nation, and that God would bless him and make his name famous, and God said that he would be a blessing to many others. Since Abram was of Semitic descendant of Shem, it would come to pass that through Abram's seed, specifically his grandson Jacob, the nation of Israel would be born. Ishmael was an older brother to Abram's natural son, so Ishmael was not of the lineage of this promise. God also said to Abram, "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and the whole world will be blessed because of you." Specifically, in Abram and his seed, a blessing would be given to all people of the earth. Since Abram did not have a son by Sarah, the only heir was a household servant. God told Abram that he would have a son coming from his own body, and that his offspring would be as numerous as the stars of the heaven. Genesis 15 and verse 6. Abram believed God, and God credited it to him as righteousness. So Abram faithfully did what he was instructed by God to go to the land of Canaan. Abram was 75 years old when he left, along with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. The land Abram was to occupy was significant. God made a covenant with Abram and said in Genesis chapter 15, 18-23, "To your descendants I will give this land, from the river of Egypt," meaning the Tigris, "to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites." Those were all the lands west of, and including those now known as Iraq and Iran, and northward through the nation of Assyria, now called Turkey. While waiting for the promise to be fulfilled, which was about 10 years, at the urging of Abram's wife Sarah to take her handmaid Hagar as a wife and have a child that Sarai could dedicate to fulfill the promise, Abram takes Hagar as his wife, and she does conceive. When Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to despise Sarai, and a conflict arose in Genesis 16 and verse 3. Hagar went into the desert to get away from Sarai, but an angel of the Lord told Hagar to go back and serve Sarai. The angel of the Lord also told Hagar that you are now with child, and you will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live in hostility toward his brothers. When Ishmael was born, Abram was 86 years old. In Genesis 17, the Lord appears to Abram when he's 99 years old, confirms the promise to Abram, and changes Abram's name to Abraham. Abraham and his descendants were to keep another covenant with God, that of circumcision of all males, and to do that for all generations to come. That day, Abraham circumcised all males in his household, including babies 8 days old and older. And those born in his household were bought with money from a foreigner. God also told Abraham that he was now to call Sarai Sarah. God told Abraham he would bless her, and she would surely have a son, and she would be the mother of nations, and kings of peoples would come from her. The name of the son was to be Isaac. Abraham said to God, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." God said, "Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear a son, and you will call him Isaac." God said he would establish his covenant with Isaac, as he had with Abraham, as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. God said he would also bless Ishmael and make him fruitful and multiply, and he would be the father of 12 rulers and make him a great nation. The fulfillment of the 12 rulers is told in Genesis 25 and verse 16. His descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the border of Egypt. Now Sarah was 89 years old when Abraham was told of Sarah bearing a son in childbirth, and would be 90 when she gave birth, while Abraham would be 100. The Lord again appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre in Genesis 18 and verse 1 as one of 3 men, And while they ate with Abraham, Sarah overheard the Lord say that a year from the time of that visit, Sarah would have a son. Since Sarah had passed the age of childbearing, she laughed when told that her son would be born next year. At the age of 90, Sarah gave birth to a son and called him Isaac, meaning laughter. At this early time, God was beginning to fulfill the promise made to Abraham through the son of Sarah, Isaac, that all nations of the earth would be blessed through them and their descendants. The son of Hagar, Ishmael, was not the son of these promises, but enjoyed God's blessing to develop into a great nation. The conflict of Sarah and Hagar continued through their lives and spilled over to their descendants. This conflict has not ceased down through the ages and can be seen by many issues between the Jewish peoples and the Arab nations to this very day. Now Isaac was a special son to Abraham, being the only son of his wife Sarah. Isaac had been born under miraculous circumstances of a mother who no longer could bear children. Further, the promise God had made to Abraham that through his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed would pass to Isaac. The promise of Genesis 17 and verse 19. Abraham was also tested by God when he required him to take Isaac as a child to the region of Moriah and sacrifice Isaac on one of the mountains God told Abraham about. When Abraham prepared the altar and put wood on it, he bound Isaac and was going to slay him with a knife before starting the fire. But an angel of the Lord stopped Abraham. God responded that he now knew Abraham feared him because he would not withhold his only son from him. God then restated the blessings and promised Abraham that through his offspring all nations on earth will be blessed. This account is found in Genesis 22. Later, Sarah dies at the age of 127, and Abraham buys a field in Machpelah near Mamre and the cave that's in it, and there Sarah was buried. Abraham was now old and well advanced in years and wanted to find a wife for Isaac. He sends his chief servant to the country where Abraham's relatives lived, and to find a wife among them, Abraham was concerned that Isaac might have to marry a Canaanite woman who would not be from the line of their fathers. His servant went to the city of Nahor, and by God's leading hand finds Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel and son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The servant tells Rebekah's family about the providential events leading to his finding her, and Rebekah's family grants permission for her to leave with the servant and marry Isaac. When the caravan returns, the servant tells Isaac about all that he had done, and Isaac, consenting, marries Rebekah, loves her very much, and was comforted after his mother's death. Abraham lived 175 years and left everything he owned to Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. She was barren, so Isaac prayed to the Lord on her behalf and she became pregnant. The babies within her jostled with one another, causing Rebekah to wonder what was happening. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples are within you, will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When it was time for the twins to be born, the first to come out was red and hairy, and he was called Esau. The brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. He was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of open country, and Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. Once when Esau returned from hunting, he was famished and wanted some stew Jacob was making. Jacob said he'd give Esau some if he would just sell him his birthright. Since Esau wanted food then, he swore an oath to Jacob that he would sell his birthright in exchange for the stew. Esau ate and drank and showed that he despised his birthright, which were all the privileges of being the firstborn son. Genesis 25 records this account. At the time of a famine in the land where they lived, God told Isaac to stay where he was and not go down to Egypt. God then repeated the promise to Isaac in Genesis 26 and verse 4. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky, and will give them all these lands, and through your offspring all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, and my decrees, and my laws. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. God blessed Isaac, and he became very wealthy, powerful, and feared by the other inhabitants of the land. A treaty was made with King Abimelech that they would do no harm to one another. Esau was now 40 years old and married 2 Hittite women, Judith and Basmath. These women were outside the lines of the family and did not know the ways of God. and they became a source of great grief to Isaac and Rebekah. When Isaac was old, and his eyes were so weak that he could not see, he called for Esau, the older son, to go out to the field, hunt some wild game for him to eat. Esau was to prepare the food the way Isaac liked it, and after eating, Isaac would bestow a blessing upon Esau that would be intended for the eldest son. Rebekah overheard Isaac's request to Esau and told Jacob, "You go to the flock and get 2 choice young goats," so she could prepare the food the way Isaac liked it. Jacob was to take the food to Isaac so that he would bless Jacob instead of Esau. Since Esau was very hairy and had an outdoor smell, Rebekah covered Jacob's hands and smoothed part of his neck with goat skins and dressed him in the best clothes of Esau. Jacob took the tasty food into Isaac. Isaac questioned how the game had been prepared so fast and that his voice sounded more like Jacob than Esau. However, after feeling the hands of Jacob with the goat skins and inhaling the smell of his clothing, Isaac was satisfied that this was Esau, his son. After eating, Isaac blessed Jacob and said, "Oh, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. And may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." As soon as Jacob had departed the room, Esau came in with the meal for Isaac. Isaac asked, "Who are you?" When Esau said he was his son Esau, Isaac trembled violently, knowing that he had given the blessing to Jacob under his seat and could not bestow another blessing. Esau said that Jacob was rightly named. He had deceived Esau 2 times, once taking his birthright and then the blessing from his father. Esau wept and pleaded with Isaac for just one blessing. And then Isaac relented and said, "Your dwelling will be away from earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw off his yoke from your neck." Therefore, the statement that the Lord made to Rebekah came to pass, that one brother would be stronger than the other, and that the older would serve the younger. Esau held a grudge against Jacob from that time on and purposed to kill his brother when his father died. When Rebekah heard this threat, she sent Jacob to her brother Laban with Isaac's blessing. Genesis 28 tells us that while Jacob was traveling to Paddan Aram to see Laban, at night he took a stone for his head, and he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth while its tops reached into the heavens, and the angels of the Lord were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, who said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land upon which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Genesis 28:11-15. So the promise now continues with Jacob. Jacob continues to see his mother's brother Laban and is taken into their family. Jacob works for Laban, falls in love with his daughter Rachel, and she becomes his wife after Laban deceitfully marries his older daughter Leah to Jacob first. Jacob works in service to Laban 7 years for each daughter and another 6 years in caring for Laban's flock before going back to Canaan. During this time, 11 sons are born to Jacob, 6 by Leah, 1 by Rachel, and 5 by his maidservants Zilpah and Bilhah. An entire caravan of people and animals traveled from Paddan Aram to the land of Canaan. The sons were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph. Genesis chapters 29 through 32 tell of these events of Jacob while he's working for Laban and his return to Canaan. After Jacob sent his family ahead, he wrestled with God, who appeared as a man through the night. He received a hip injury when he was touched by God, and also was told his name would no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because he struggled with God and men and had overcome. Jacob prepared to meet Esau as they neared Canaan by sending droves of gifts ahead of their meeting. When Esau saw all that Jacob intended to give him, he graciously accepted, and their meeting was friendly. Jacob arrived safely in the city of Shechem in the land of Canaan. Then God told Jacob to go to Bethel, build an altar to God, and settle there. God appeared to Jacob again and blessed him, telling him to no longer go by the name Jacob, but to use the name Israel. He repeated the promise to Israel again in Genesis 35, 9-12. God said, I am the God Almighty, be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and community of nations will come from you, and kings will come from your body. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you. I will give this land to your descendants after you. The patriarchs had no doubt that God was giving them land to them and to their descendants. While moving from Bethel to Ephrath, Rachel started giving birth to another son, and as she breathed her last, she named him Ben-Oni, but his father renamed him Benjamin, according to Genesis 35. Benjamin was the 12th son, and along with the other 11 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, from which the nation of Israel grew to be several million people over time. Judah and his descendants carry the promise, and we look at this a little closer in our study as Jacob is on his deathbed and tells his 12 sons what will happen to them. The main theme of this story now continues through Joseph. Abraham's wife Sarah laughed when she was told that she would have a son when she was 89. A year later she named him Laughter. The promise of someone coming to bless all the nations continues in Genesis 26 and verse 4 to Abraham's son Isaac. The promise of someone coming to bless all nations continues in Genesis 26 and verse 4 to Abraham's son Isaac. The promise continues in Genesis 28 and verse 14 to Isaac's son Jacob. Jacob's name is changed to Israel, and he has 12 sons. This is the beginning of the nation of Israel. The promise continues through his son Judah, but his son Joseph plays a key role in the continuation of the story. This chart shows a likely route that the Midianite merchant caravan took after purchasing Joseph and carrying him to Egypt, where he was sold to Potiphar. He was sold by his brothers in the field of Dothan in the land of Canaan, and the caravan likely followed what was considered a highway route to Egypt. It seems that this route was favored by merchants when traveling to and from Egypt. Since Joseph was the firstborn to Rachel and was born in Israel's old age, Israel favored Joseph over his brothers, Genesis 37. Israel made a richly ornamental robe for Joseph. When his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than them, they hated him and refused to speak a kind word to him. Joseph also had dreams which he told to his brothers. He said to them, We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said, Do you really intend to reign and rule over us? They hated him all the more because of his dream. Joseph told his brothers about a second dream. Listen, this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father, Israel rebuked him. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous, but his father kept the matter in mind. Sometime later, Israel asked Joseph to go to the field where they were tending the flocks to see if all was well with them. Joseph went to Shechem, but caught up with them in Dothan. When his brothers saw him from a distance, they plotted to kill him. Reuben, his oldest brother, hearing about the plot, tried to rescue him. Reuben tried to convince his brothers not to shed any blood or take his life, but to put Joseph into a cistern, from which he hoped to rescue Joseph later. And so they threw him into a dry cistern. While eating, a caravan of Ishmaelites came along. The brothers decided to sell him for money rather than kill their own brother, so they sold Joseph for 20 shekels of silver to the caravan merchants. When Reuben returned to the cistern, Joseph was missing. The other brothers devised a scheme to take Joseph's ornamented coat they had kept, dip the robe in goat's blood, and take it to their father. They showed Jacob the coat, and he assumed some ferocious animal had eaten Joseph. He mourned for his son many days. Meanwhile, the Midianite merchants sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, who was captain of the guard and an official to Pharaoh. The Lord took care of Joseph while he was put in charge of Potiphar's household and everything he owned. The Lord blessed Potiphar's household because of Joseph, both in the house and in the field. The only thing Potiphar concerned himself was with the food he ate. After a while, Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph because he was well built and handsome, and she invited him to her bed. He refused, both because of his loyalty to his master and because it was a sin against God. Daily, she continued to try to seduce Joseph. One day, when no servants were in the house, she caught Joseph by the cloak to force him again, but he fled from her, leaving the cloak in her hand. Angry at the rejection, Potiphar's wife called her servants, accusing this Hebrew of making sport of me, accusing Joseph of wanting to sleep with her. She told her husband Potiphar the same story. When Joseph's master heard this, his anger was aroused. Potiphar had Joseph cast into the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. Yet the Lord was with Joseph and gave him favor in the prison warden's eyes. Soon the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison and all else that was done. His service was so excellent that the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, and Joseph had success in everything he did. According to Genesis 40, the cupbearer and baker of the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, were confined to the same prison as Joseph. They were assigned to Joseph's care. While in prison, the cupbearer and the baker each had a dream on the same night. Each dream had a meaning of its own. The next morning, Joseph noticed they appeared dejected. He asked them, "Why are your faces so sad today?" They said they both had had dreams, but no one could interpret them. Joseph told them interpretations belonged to God and asked them to tell him their dreams. The cupbearer said in his dream he saw a vine with 3 branches in front of him. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, its clusters ripening into grapes. He held Pharaoh's cup in his hand, squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in the hand of Pharaoh. Joseph told him what the dream meant. He said the 3 branches were 3 days, and within those 3 days, Pharaoh would restore the cupbearer to his position and put the cup in Pharaoh's hand again. And Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him, to mention him to Pharaoh that he might get out of prison. Joseph told him that he had been carried off from the land of the Hebrews and had done nothing to deserve being put in prison. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation to the chief cupbearer, he told Joseph his dream. He saw 3 baskets of bread on his head. The top basket contained all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds ate them out of the basket. Joseph told the baker the meaning of the dream. The baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head, hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh. On the 3rd day, which happened to be Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a great feast, and he restored the chief cupbearer to his position. But the chief baker was hanged, just as Joseph had told them. The cupbearer forgot Joseph, and he languished in prison 2 full years. Then, in chapter 41, Pharaoh had a dream. In his dream, he stands by the Nile River. 7 sleek and fat cows come out and graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, come out of the Nile, and they stood before the fat cows and ate them up. Then Pharaoh awoke. But after falling asleep, he had a second dream. In the second dream, Pharaoh saw 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, growing on a single stalk. 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads then swallowed up the 7 healthy heads. The dreams troubled Pharaoh, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them. The chief cupbearer suddenly remembered Joseph. He told Pharaoh of a Hebrew who had interpreted his and the baker's dream in prison. He told Pharaoh things turned out exactly as he told them. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph. Joseph told him he could not interpret dreams, but God would give the Pharaoh the answers he desired. Joseph told Pharaoh his dreams about the cows and the grains of wheat were one and the same. He said that God had revealed to Pharaoh what he was about to do. 7 years of great abundance will be coming throughout the land of Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. The famine would be so bad that the great abundance of the years before would be forgotten. He also said the dream was given in 2 forms because the matter had been firmly decided by God, and it would happen soon. Joseph also told Pharaoh that he should appoint a wise man and commissioners over the land and put aside 1/5 of the produce during the good years and store the grain under the authority of Pharaoh so that there would be food in the cities during the famine and the country would not be ruined. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and his officials. Since God had revealed this to Joseph, Pharaoh considered Joseph to be more wise and discerning than all the others, and made him to be only second to himself concerning his palace and the whole land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he went into the service of Pharaoh. Let's take a moment to review. Joseph is the next to the youngest son of Jacob, who was called Israel, and he was Jacob's favorite since he was born by Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. God gives Jacob several dreams, showing his parents and brothers will all bow down and serve him. This makes his brothers angry, and they plan to kill Joseph, but instead sell him to a caravan headed to Egypt, and there he's sold as a slave. He becomes the head of the servants in a house owned by a man named Potiphar, who happened to be the captain of the guard of Pharaoh. But he's falsely accused of immoral conduct by Potiphar's wife and is thrown into prison, where he rises to the highest ranking prisoner. While in prison, two inmates, a butler and a baker for Pharaoh, have troubling dreams. Joseph reveals the meaning of the dreams. One of the dreams said that Pharaoh's butlers would get his old job back, but the other, the baker, would die. 3 days later, both dreams come true, and Joseph asks the butler to remember him before Pharaoh because he's wrongly accused. But 2 full years later, when Pharaoh is having a troubling dream, his magicians can tell him nothing about it. But the butler finally remembers about Joseph interpreting the dreams, and Joseph is called. Joseph says God would give him the answer, and God then revealed that there would be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, and the famine would consume all that had been stored during the time of plenty. To survive, Joseph suggests a grain storage program. Pharaoh is impressed and puts Joseph second in command, and Joseph starts the saving program for Egypt.